Hi, everybody. Today, joining me is Lawrence Eichen, and I'm so excited to have him here with me today and to join all of you. He is, like me, an attorney. He is a speaker, a certified Rethinking Impostor Syndrome coach, and an EFT practitioner. I connected with Lawrence through, I believe, a CLE that I offered on mindfulness, and we've been corresponding through LinkedIn. So it's a real joy to have you here today to help us unpack imposter syndrome. Try to say that 5 times, but to unpack imposter syndrome and to explore how tools like mindfulness can help us to move from self-doubt to self-trust. So a big welcome to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Courtney. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, my understanding is that prior to working as an attorney, like me, you had a career before that, only you had a career in something that I know nothing about. I know a little bit about, but I could never carry the title of programming or programmer. So, can you tell us a little bit about your path from having worked as a programmer and then transitioned into working as a lawyer and how that brought up issues like imposter syndrome for you?
Sure, absolutely. So I did come out of college with a computer science degree, and I worked as a programmer for a few years. And then for the in the interest of time, I'll just say I didn't know what else to do with my life. And so I decided I'm just going to apply to law school and maybe, become an attorney. So I was really just very confused. It's not like I hated programming, but for whatever reason, at that point in my life, I just wasn't happy. And I thought, maybe going to law school might be a better way for me going forward. So I applied, I got in, and next thing you know, here I am in law school, studying to be an attorney. And right away, even at that point, I felt like I was an imposter, even though I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was like, right? So this is not a term that I was familiar with until much later on in my life. But I definitely, looking back, felt it immediately because I was looking at all these other people in law school thinking, they want to really be lawyers and I'm a programmer. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
So I really felt like totally like the fish out of water. And that carried through, once I became an attorney and started to practice. And I immediately went into litigation and getting into court and doing all those things. And so now I'm going into courthouses and having trials, jury trials or bench trials and negotiating with lawyers. And all this time in my background, even though I did pass the bar, and all that, and I did well in law school, and I was doing well even in court, it still felt like I am just waiting for somebody to say, "What in the world are you doing here?" Because
Yeah.
you are not a lawyer. You're a programmer, and who are you kidding? So
Yeah.
my journey was really always feeling stressed out no matter what I was doing and no matter how good the results were.
Right.
Even with the good results. And that's one of the things about imposter syndrome that anybody who's experienced it, a lot of times it's high achieving people that experience imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And the results don't really cure you of not feeling like an imposter. It's almost like it's like, oh, thank God I faked everybody out. That's kind of what it feels like. Yeah, oh, I faked the jury out. They came back with the result in my
Yeah.
favor. Boy, I faked them out. I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
I stand up like a lawyer and they think I'm a lawyer. They know that I know computer code and that's what I should be doing. So
You dress and act the part and they bought into it. Right.
yeah,
That's like you
exactly,
tell yourself.
exactly.
Yeah.
It must, and actually, you raise a good point because it's like, oh, maybe they just, the suit and the tie looked good, and I really did fake them out.
Yeah.
So that's really like this, in a nutshell, that's kind of been my story of fighting off those feelings like somebody's going to find out, whether it's another attorney, whether it's a judge, whether
Yeah.
it's clients, sitting in a conference room. It's not just when I would go into the courthouse, but I'm having consultations, right, with clients. That was one of the most stressful things because think about it. The client comes in to talk to the lawyer who's presumably an expert on something, right? They
Yeah.
think they know what they're doing, right? And
Yeah.
on the other side of the table, here I am thinking, oh my God, don't ask me a question that I don't know, because now I'm going to be exposed as like, I'm really not this lawyer that you think I am. So
Yeah.
it really came up in a lot of different situations for me in the practice of law that I was always constantly dealing with that.
Yeah. This rings true to my experience. I had a similar journey in that I kind of went to law school because I didn't know what else to do. I had taken 3 years off in between college and law school. Only I had an interest in the creative sector. I was working as a photographer, and here I was shooting for Bloomingdale's catalog. It was the furthest thing from the way we're conditioned to think and act and be in law school and as a practicing attorney. And there was a piece within me that very much liked that regimented lifestyle and helping people. But when I was in law school, like you, I'd look around and be like, oh, they're going to be a great attorney. Like they're cut out for this. And when I got this great job as a litigator at a really well-respected firm, and to your point, I don't even think I mean, I'm sure there were cases where, like an arbitration level, it wasn't as favorable as I'd like for it to turn out. But for the most part, I was a very, very successful attorney. I won cases left and right. I wrote briefs that people would tell me, like, wow, that's amazing. But deep down inside, I didn't feel like I was truly an attorney. I still felt as if I was playing a part and somebody was going to figure me out. And what was really a heavy burden to carry is each day that I walked into the firm or I met with a client or I was before a judge, there was this ongoing theme that I wasn't good enough. That one day when I'm really like a real attorney, when I've arrived, so to speak, even though I had 2 decades worth of wins and defense verdicts, I represented defendants, I still felt like I wasn't good enough. And so I think this does show up for a lot of high achievers, and to carry that weight into the work that you do, even when you're getting really good results, takes away from how you feel, your ability to feel comfortable in your body and in your mind. I'm curious because of you've experienced what it's like to suffer from imposter syndrome, and now you support people, you help people to overcome imposter syndrome. How does that show up within the body? Like I know we can get very caught up in the head as we were sharing about what we tell ourselves, but how does it actually, have you ever personally noticed, or in the people that your clients, the people that you work together with and help, does it come out in ways through the body?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I can tell you first, my own experience was definitely always feeling like that, tension.
Yeah.
For me, it was always just tension. I was very good at masking that. I think
Mhm.
if you spoke to people and said, "Oh, did you know that Lawrence had imposter syndrome? He was always stressed out." I don't think that they might have concluded that because I think it comes from being an athlete and coming from a very competitive sports background. You
Yeah.
learn to sort of not let on. And maybe it's
Right.
just men in general. We don't know what feelings are anyway, I guess. But you tend to sort of like keep yourself, with a game face,
Yeah.
right? So if I went into court, I had a game face on, you wouldn't know that I was really stressing out about being discovered as an imposter because I was
Right.
good at compartmentalizing that emotion. But internally for me, definitely my stomach was tight, I could feel the tension. I don't even know that I was aware of it to the extent that I was feeling it because I'm so used to
Yeah.
doing those things when it came to competing, right? And when you go into
Yeah.
court, you're competing. But I have seen clients, and have talked to clients about how it manifests for them. And, it's all over the place, right? How do people deal with stress? Because really, this is a stressful phenomenon
Hmm.
that you're dealing with, right? So some people, it's really a lot of anxiety. They might break out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their face gets a little discolored. I know one woman would tell me sometimes that she'd have some blotches on her skin, that she'd had to
Ugh.
cover with makeup.
Yeah.
I know another individual that I coach, is more drinking, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
deal with the ramifications of it afterwards. Sometimes, a lot of times, somebody like is able to compartmentalize, right? And then when the event is over, whatever it is that they're doing, where they feel like they faked everybody out and they got
Mhm.
through it, right? Because usually the results are good, but it's
Yeah.
then, okay, now the event is over. And now the whole keeping it down and keeping it stuffed in
Yeah.
has, now come out, and there's a lot more of the feeling part of that because they've been shutting that down. And so
Right.
all that stress and anxiety, it's like, I need a drink.
Right.
So then it becomes like, somebody saying, hey, I end up going and having a couple of drinks every time after I'm done with work. I've got to have that drink because they've been holding everything at bay. So to answer your question, a long answer is it really varies from individual. What is their coping
Right.
mechanism with these feelings, or what is their coping mechanism to stop these feelings from
Mhm.
coming through? And
It
it
can,
really varies.
yeah, it can be physically taxing, and it can cause us to resort to maladaptive coping mechanisms as you're sharing, drinking, whether it's drugs or overwork, like throwing ourselves back into our work, that it
Yeah.
becomes very cyclical. But I do think it's very commonplace within the legal sector, especially, and as a litigator, that we have to stuff down what maybe won't appear as attractive or pleasant if we were good attorneys. So we suppress it, and then it just causes our stress levels to be compounded. And what in the programs that I teach, the mindfulness programs and workshops, what can be helpful with imposter syndrome is we get so caught in the story that we tell ourselves and the thoughts, and believing that we're not good enough and someone's going to figure us out and we're not the real deal. Sometimes when we can bring a sense of compassion and curiosity into the body and actually feel what it is we're experiencing in the body, as opposed to having to be controlled by our thoughts, sometimes just bringing that attention into the body can help us to let go of some of the burden. And the more and more we can let our felt sensations, rather than our stories or that critic, that inner critic, steer how things are going to go, or actually steer what's happening in the moment, it can have a bit more of a calming effect. So I was just curious if there was anything like that when you're working with your clients, if in what you notice coming up for them or what they're noticing coming up for them that they share with you, if having more of an embodied experience as opposed to having to believe the negative things that we tend to tell ourselves, if
Actually,
that's supportive. Yeah.
yeah, you're reminding me of something that actually ties into exactly what you're talking about. Is one of the times when I'm working with clients and we discuss things, right? So there's like an intellectual component to defeating imposter syndrome, right? It's
Yeah.
understanding what it is, and
Hmm.
it's also understanding what it's not. And I always say, when I speak to audiences, if I'm speaking about it, or if I'm speaking or coaching somebody, one of the things I always routinely say is, it's not this, it's not this, but here's the other thing, it's not true, right?
Mm.
Because it's not true, right? Because I started out by saying, it's not a medical diagnosis, right? So it's not a mental disorder, right? You're not going to
Right,
find it in the DSM. You're not going to find it in the physician's desk record, right? The PDR. But it's also not true, meaning you're not really an imposter. But we think we are, right, for all these other reasons. But the truth, like the truth about you, is that it's not true. So that when you do start to feel some stress and anxiety in it's being triggered in whatever it is that you're doing. And a lot of times it gets triggered. It's not like people walk around 100% of the time thinking I'm an imposter. It's
right,
usually like performance related, right?
right.
So going into court or doing that presentation that you have to do at work or maybe being an actor and having to get on stage and all these things that might trigger imposter syndrome when you start to get stressed out, because even if you understand it intellectually, these are long-standing habits that we have and we might respond initially with the stress or anxiety. But what I try to tell people is if you start to feel that way, to catch that, to your
Mm-hmm.
point, and recognize your body is telling you something, and then take a second and say that's actually not true.
Mm.
Because what's happening is you're getting the thought that you're going to be exposed or found out. You're getting the thought that you believe you're an imposter. And it's from remembering and telling yourself, actually, that thought's not true.
Yeah,
That thought's
yeah,
not true. And I'm reacting as if that is true. And if you can take that moment, if you can catch yourself, that has a chance of taking it from your body and
mm.
catching it and stopping yourself from going down that pitfall and going into that rat hole of the same type of thoughts that you end up having, which are, oh, I better be perfect. I
Yeah,
better not make a mistake. I
yeah,
better worry. You start going through that whole routine that, in a sense, you believe works for you because it never gets you exposed, right? So
right.
there's this like odd thing going on in your head. You take on this whole thought process and you start taking on all these behaviors. And on some level, you're reinforcing yourself like, well, I faked everybody out again, and I'm not exposed as an imposter. So these thoughts, this routine works for me, even though all of it is based
Yeah,
on a false belief that you really are an imposter. So if you can nip that false belief by catching it and recognizing that's not true, taking an extra minute, that can stop the rest of the thoughts from going
right.
and you continuing down that whole behavior that you go through.
I like even the way you frame it, like you can catch it as opposed to it catching, like latching onto you and reeling you in, and you lose any sense of agency. But when we can observe the storyline or the inner narrative and we can be an observer of it as opposed to having to believe it, like it's actually here. We're not disputing that these thoughts aren't actually here, but to your point, they're not true. And
They're
when
not
we
true,
can,
right?
yeah, when we can kind of distance ourselves, create some space to be
Yeah.
able to identify that, okay, here's, what we call them like our top 10 tunes. Like what keeps showing up for us? What's the story? What's this narrative that's like on repeat? And when we can start to recognize the way it plays out in our life, but how it doesn't really serve us, and we don't have to follow, we don't have to buy into it, then we can actually open up to what's really here. Not having to get controlled by those untrue thoughts. The analogy that we sometimes use when we, in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, when we're trying to help or at least have participants connect with these innate, I like to refer to them as powers, because when you can separate yourself from the thoughts, it's very empowering. But we use the analogy of a river, and as if you're sitting on the riverbank, like the edge of the river, and you're looking into the flow of the river, the stream of water, and you can just observe the stream of thoughts, but you're not in the stream, you're
Right.
outside looking, just observing. And when you can just let them flow, but not have to like jump in the water and let them take you down the river, it really does offer a sense of freedom and let you connect with reality, what's actually here, as opposed to what is it that I'm telling myself that's going to take me down, but it's not true. So
Yeah.
I like how you help people to separate themselves from those thoughts.
Yeah,
Why?
you could even
Sorry.
say, I'm sorry, you could even say like, you could quantify, say, oh, there goes my unenlightened self. That's my unenlightened self giving me some messages, or there, you could name, oh, that's my imposter speaking. You
Yeah.
could actually just quantify it that way, whatever works for you, right? But
Right.
it's to your point, like you're quantifying something else, this conglomerate of thoughts, this entity that lives within
Hmm.
you that is really just based on a false belief. That's all
Yeah.
that is. It's based on a false belief. And the hardest part, I will say, is catching yourself. For me, I'll speak for myself here. One of the hardest parts for me was recognizing that I was so stressed out internally, like when it was happening, because I was so
Hmm.
in trying to succeed in the
Right.
moment, right? Performing that I didn't even recognize, wow, my stomach really was tight that entire time because I'm so accustomed to doing it. It's like
Yeah.
that's the normal for me.
Right.
And then when you
Right.
realize, wow, there's a different way to do this and feel, that's when you can start catching it. But you have to become aware of that. And that's not always easy because there's so many patterns and habits and beliefs that have been going on and circulating that we tend to normalize them and think that's the way it is, but it really doesn't. And just on that point, one further point is that's why sometimes change is hard because let's look at the athlete as an example, right? Because
Hmm.
athletes go through imposter syndrome too, right? If an athlete has to perform at a very high level and has been performing at a very high level, and
Hmm.
now he's tired of the stress of feeling like an imposter, in
Hmm.
order to break that, he has to trust, or she has to trust, right?
Yeah.
That if I give up this routine of thoughts and anxiety and stress and throwing up before the game,
Yeah.
I won't produce the way that that I need to produce.
Right.
And that's like a leap of faith that actually you'll be even better than you ever were. And you will be way more peaceful and stressful. And I can tell from my own personal experience, I'm a much better attorney that when I'm not dealing with imposter syndrome than when I was. But it took a long time for me to trust that if I put down the routine of the imposter syndrome, I'd
Yeah.
still be able to get results because I was relying on some level of that routine for the success. So it's tricky, it's hard. That's where the hard work is, trusting that new ways will still result in the same results. We'll still end up with the same results, if not better. But more importantly, you'll be way more peaceful and way more enjoying your own success because what you
Yeah.
said, a lot of times you have great success yourself, but you don't even feel it. You're just thinking you fake people out and it's on to the next project. And so you don't get a chance to really enjoy your own achievements. You're really disowning them in a lot of ways or diminishing them on a in a different a part of you is diminishing them emotionally, let's call it, or spiritually, or however you want to phrase it. But
Yeah.
it's so that's the benefit of defeating it, I guess.
I like the example that you give about the athlete because a lot of really successful athletes, they are so regimented in their ways and they have these rituals and patterns, more or less habits. And I think with imposter syndrome, we can fall into these habitual routines, feeling it's a false sense of security
Yeah.
and it's a way of doing things, but it takes us out of truly being and being who we are. But to your point, you mentioned awareness. Mindfulness is our ability to be aware of how we are relating to ourselves and the moments of our lives, our experiences. So when we can strengthen our awareness of what's coming up for ourselves, both in mind and body, like what are we telling ourselves? What thoughts are here? What am I feeling in the body? what emotions are here, the more and more we can link up with the unpleasant sensations, the unpleasant thoughts that come up for us when we're suffering with imposter syndrome. And the more and more we can replace those for more or less the habits or those routines and feel into the pleasant sensations, the more trueness to who we are, the more and more we lean into that. There's this, I don't want to get too sciencey on everyone here, but from a neuroscience standpoint, we can create more and more neural pathways so that we can outweigh those unskillful routines and habits that really no longer serve us, and we can replace them. We can grow and really nourish these healthier ways of being. So again, to your point, the awareness piece, if we're not aware, if we're just falling into automatic pilot, and in our lives as attorneys, we're so busy working really hard on our cases, trying to get great outcomes for our clients, grinding out work day, night, all the time, when we don't allow ourselves to step out of all that doing and to notice how we are, then I think we just become prisoners of our thoughts, of imposter syndrome, and we can never truly heal and grow as individuals and as professionals. So I like that you highlight this awareness piece, and the for me, just because maybe it's because I have 3 sons and a husband who are huge sports fans, Philly sports fans, no less, and um, constantly hearing about different athletes and the different rituals they have. That's a really powerful analogy for me. So thank you for sharing that. I know, in addition to the work that you do with attorneys and helping them work through imposter syndrome, it's not only attorneys, any type
Right.
of professional, but the there's another practice that you have knowledge about, and it's something that we teach a little bit, or at least we guide in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program at the Center for Mindfulness. It's known as tapping, or emotional freedom technique. And so if you could just give us a little bit of understanding of what EFT is about and how that can help with reducing stress, anxiety, and other symptoms that come up with imposter syndrome.
Sure. EFT, as you said, or tapping, is really like it's based on the principle of the mind-body connection, right?
Yeah.
Which a lot of people are familiar with that, Eastern medicine, all these acupressure points, right? So it's a combination of psychological inputs, meaning like talking, and also using the meridians and the points on the body. And I kind of discovered it, I'm going to say maybe 7, 8 years ago. A friend had told me about it, and I didn't know they mentioned tapping, and what do I think? I'm thinking tap dancing. Like, what are
Yeah,
they
yeah, me
talking about,
too.
right? What is tapping? I never heard of this thing, but I started to look into it, read up on it, and what I loved about tapping is, I mean, I do love the whole concept of, mind-body connection.
Yeah.
I always bought into that. I've read books on that stuff. I really am a big believer of that. So I was an easy person to kind of explore this. And the thing I love about tapping is that it's a remedy that you can actually do yourself,
Hmm.
as opposed to needing to go find somebody to talk to, maybe if you don't have the time to.
Right.
Not to say that talking to somebody who's a professional, who's somebody who can help you, is not that's a good thing, I always think, because we're blinded to our own stuff, right? Everybody's blinded to things,
Yeah.
and having a second set of eyes, that can help. But in between seeing somebody, when you need some quick relief or something, you want to change your state from stressed out to calm and peaceful, you can do this on your own, and you can do it in a few minutes, and it's very easy to learn how to do it. That's what I loved about it, because I learned how to do it. And then you can find yourself being able to shift your state of being, and get yourself out of these high anxiety, high stressful moments, and rebalance yourself internally, because that's really what it is. It's like we're all energy. We all have these, unseen energy systems going around inside of us. And tapping is a way of trying to take advantage of that through certain rituals of speaking and tapping on these points around your face and your hands and your collarbones. And I'm giving you the quick and dirty here in just in a couple of
Yeah,
minutes here,
yeah,
obviously, but it's the concept of being able to use that powerful mind-body connection and rebalance yourself so that you can get yourself into that most powerful state for yourself, which I firmly believe everybody's most powerful state is when they're calm, peaceful, and loving. I just think
mm,
that's your most powerful state, and you do the
yeah,
best work. You do the best work no matter what your work is when you're peaceful, calm, and loving. And you come from
true.
when you come from a place of love, you're peaceful within yourself, you're calm. That's when you perform your best. I don't care what you're doing. You
Yeah,
cannot top those qualities, and that's what EFT is trying to get you back to. And it works for so many different things. I mean, phobias that people have, fear of flying, fear of heights, so many phobias people have gone through using EFT, and it's resolved that for them.
yeah,
But athletes have used it also, golfers, basketball players. It's like it's an amazing concept, and it's just widespread. Like millions and millions of people worldwide use EFT, which is also known as tapping, as you said. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if I gave you a good enough
no,
description
that's
of it.
wonderful. It's wonderful. And I think it's a compliment to mindfulness because it helps you to notice strong emotions, challenging thoughts. But then when you're tapping and actually letting attention rest more fully on the sensation and what it feels like to tap to receive the tapping within the body, it takes us out of our head. So we have a more embodied experience and it's a nice way to give ourselves time to rest from all of the thinking and worrying and strategizing and to just feel into the body. So just from the mindfulness angle, again, it's not something that I'm formally trained, it's not something that we formally offer as part of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, but we weave it in, and I love that mind-body connection that we can incline ourselves in the direction of ease. And to your point, when the nervous system is calmer, when our cortisol levels are lower, and when we feel a sense of love both within, number one, and when we can feel again probably we're not necessarily going to feel love to the adversary on the other side of our case, but when we can feel a sense of connectedness, when we can feel safe within ourselves, then we can perform better and we can focus better, which is really important in the work that many professionals do. So I know we're coming to the end of this episode. I do want to share with listeners, if somebody in this moment is feeling like a fraud, like they're just not the real deal, what's one thing that you would want them to hear as they walk away from this episode? What's one gem of information, one piece of advice that you can give them to help them know that what it is they're telling themselves isn't necessarily true?
Yeah, I would say number one, you're not alone, and it's nothing to feel ashamed about. So I would say number one, right? If you're feeling that way, imposter syndrome is widespread. It's extremely common. It's not just a lawyer thing or a doctor thing, or it's any profession, and it affects everybody in all various aspects of professions in life. So number one, you're not alone. Number two is, that it's what I said earlier. It is not your truth. Like you might feel that. We're not saying the feelings that you have aren't real. That they're real. Those feelings of anxiety or stress and worry that you're going to be found out. That's real that you're experiencing that.
Right,
But the underlying thought that you are a fraud or that you are an imposter, that's what I'm saying is not true. So
right.
I would hope to encourage anybody who's listening that's struggling with imposter syndrome to say, hey, hold on a second. This is something that affects a lot of people, not just myself. And if this isn't really my truth, well, then I gotta, maybe I just gotta learn more about this and figure out a way to defeat this because the way that I'm behaving and acting as a result of believing this is actually based on a false premise. That's good news. See, that's actually good news because
Yeah.
even though you might be dealing with it, it's good news to recognize that's not who you are. The who you are is really the skilled, competent, talented individual. You're just diminishing, most likely, this is what happens. You diminish your achievements and your success. You tend to think they're not really you, and you're believing in this other false belief, and you're using that to create your internal reality. And all you need to do is switch it. All
Mm.
you need to do is switch it to believe the real truth about you and let go of the false narrative that's dictating that stress and all that. So I would hope that somebody there would, just hang on to that and then
Yeah.
seek out anybody that you can help talk about it. Because the one thing you don't want to do is try to do this on your own and get yourself caught up in your own thinking sometimes because it's hard to get out of that
Yeah.
thought process on your own. So don't let shame, if shame is a feeling that you're feeling about this, don't let that stop you from communicating with whoever it is you need to communicate with to hopefully resolve this, because that's what shame can do. Shame can make us not want to talk about it, and
Hmm.
by not talking about it, we live with it more. And
It
life's
grows
too short.
stronger.
Life's too
Right.
short, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. When we don't talk about it and sort of suppress it, it can grow stronger. But
Yeah.
when we face it and we explore it with kindness, with love, which may seem counterintuitive, but when we can actually embrace what's here and find skillful ways to deal with it and work with skillful people who know how to better manage it, then we can work through it. So, if somebody wanted to work together with you or learn more about upcoming speaking engagements that you have or workshops, is there a great way for them to connect with you?
Probably the easiest way to connect with me is through an email. That would be my first name, Lawrence, with a W, not a U, LAWRENCE at firstclassspeaking.com. All one word, first spelled out, class speaking. Should have three S's in there with
And
the
I'll make sure.
firstclassspeaking.com.
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut you off. I'll make sure to include everything in the episode so it'll be an easy lift for all of our viewers and listeners to connect with Lawrence.
Great.
Yeah, Lawrence, thank you so much. I'm grateful that we connected through the legal community slash LinkedIn and really grateful for all of the valuable information that you shared with our audience today. So thank you
Uh,
so much.
you're very welcome, Courtney, and it's my pleasure to be here. And it was great to meet you finally and having talked to you through LinkedIn as well. So I really enjoyed this and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.